and we can have some questions also at the end. As you know, MEMS is a very hot topic in whole of technology now. And as you know, photonics is the technology of this century. So let us get going. Combination of MEMS and photonics will give us what can be called as MOEMS. So this is a brief outline of my presentation. I'll give some many examples of MEMS and MOEMS, and little bit about the fabrication and lot of applications. That's what I would like to give in this talk. And in between, I'll put little bit of work that we have been doing in our lab. This is one of the areas of interest, research interest in our lab, and also in IISc. So broadly, you can categorize MOEMS in terms of combination of electrical, optical, and mechanical devices on a small wafer. Usually, nowadays, silicon is the most popular material for these applications, even though there are many other new materials that are coming up. Because of the ease of fabrication and well-developed VLSI technology, you have this silicon as an important material. You see a lot of things, information on this slide. In particular, you can see this Venn diagram, which shows the combination of optical, electrical, and mechanical devices on a small wafer, constituting the MOEMS. And of course, all these pictures of silicon devices that people have made. So this is a wheel that has been made. Of course, this is an entire set of silicon wafer from which you cut down all these things. This is a cross section of one of the devices. And also you have the logos of Colorado University here. This slide is taken from one of the SPIE workshops long ago, which represents many things. There's a logo of DARPA here, who are one of the sponsors of many of these programs, which started in the US about 20 years ago or so. So all these things are there on this slide. So it is called microsystem technology in some countries, MEMS in some other countries. In India, there is a term called smart systems and structures. So that is also a popular keyword. So these are all relates to what MEMS does and what it is. So this slide shows the worldwide growth of MEMS. So you can say that by the end of the last century, people have realized that hardware is very important in all the technology. And MEMS has been found to be very important. A lot of devices can be made on silicon wafer itself, and so on. So you can see what are the various areas of applications. For example, you have the pressure sensors taking an important role. Then you have the inertial sensors for aircraft and navigation and all these applications. Then you have the optical switching. See, people thought that networking is important. By the end of last century, you know that internet has developed, and people thought that optical networks will be important. So fluid regulation concerns the biomedical applications, and so on. There are so many applications of MEMS, including optical MEMS. So you see so much of money is being pumped into this technology in US. So as usual, it has, of course, India has picked up, but much of the development is in the US. And of course, you can see the number of papers published for those who want to get into the subject and those who want to do research or take up projects. A lot of papers have been published in this subject, almost an exponential growth. So this is a brief history of MEMS technology. You can say that the starting point is the Richard Feynman's statement that you can make the entire Encyclopedia Britannica on the head of a pin. That is the smallest dimensions that you can go. That's what it means. Long ago, in about the end of 1950s, beginning of 60s, you know that at the beginning of the 1960s is the invention of laser. Okay, so following that invention of laser, all the technology of fiber optics, photonics, etc., has developed. A lot of biomedical applications. Communication is one of the demonstrations of the power of photonics. It shows that photonics will play an important role in communication, and so now it is playing an important role. So there are a lot of other developments. There you can read them on the slide later. So I would like to highlight one or two important milestones in the history of MEMS. Bulk etching of silicon is one of the important techniques that people have thought to make structures in silicon, mechanical structures. I will try to ignore electronic devices now. For the time being, I'll focus on the optical devices only because it's a MOEM's lecture. So you can, of course, mechanical is important. We want to combine mechanical and optical in this lecture. So bulk etching of silicon can be used to make a lot of devices like pressure sensors and so on. All this developed in the 70s. So this is one of the important papers. Peterson's paper, Silicon is a Structural Material, demonstrates that silicon can be used for mechanical applications and MEMS applications. Then, of course, there is what is called the surface micromachining. It's a technology using polysilicon to make more sophisticated devices like motors and actuators and all these things. So you can say that the technology of MEMS uses VLSI technology. Then you need movement, transduction, and actuation is an important requirement of functionality. If you want to, not simply making the structures, but we have to make them operate. So that's where actuation and transduction will be important. A lot of devices have been made. Of course, many of them electronic control. As you know, electronics has also played an important role in the last century. Then, of course, in terms of support, you know that government agencies have supported this MEMS development, in particular the defense organizations. Then they have set up what is called this MUMS, Multi-User MEMS Processing Facility. So many organizations come together as a consortium to make these MUMS. Government agencies, then the industry, the universities all have come together in US to set up this MUMS facility. For those who are interested, you can go to the MUMS website and see what all they can do. Now a lot of developments have taken place. You can see all the processes involved in the MEMS from the finer details. If someone has a design, you can send it to MUMS and get it fabricated, and you can bring back and test it here if you have some new idea. Of course, you will have to pay something for each of these things. Nowadays, a lot of things have become commercialized. Then I will highlight another few more important things. So let us look in terms of course, I'll comment on the developments in India also. A similar thing has happened. Government agencies, the DRDO labs, the ISRO, and institutes like NITs, IITs, and so on have come together to set up MEMS foundries in India. You know that in 2005 or so, there were two programs that have started called NPSM, National Program of Smart Materials. In IIT Bombay and ISC, they have started the MEMS design centers. Then following that, a lot of fabrication facilities also have been set up in all the IITs and ISCs. By 2010, we have got this Center for Nanoscience and Engineering in ISC, where anyone can come and fabricate your devices. On the similar lines of MEMS, not so sophisticated or not so supportive, but still many things can be done in ISC or IIT Bombay and other IITs also. So in fact, they have a lot of programs like nanoelectronics, National Nanoelectronics Program, and so on and so forth, where they can fund also a little bit. I don't know what is the status happening in those lines, but still facilities are available. That's what I would like to say in India. But of course, I will also say that they are not sufficient. And we also require a lot of expertise. The users will have to require a lot of expertise to use them. There are people who will help you to do them there. But we ourselves have to learn. Those who are working on this will have to learn a little bit of technology also. But of course, I can say that learning the tools, the software tools, the design methods, etc., is not very difficult. But fabrication will require a lot of money and support from other foundry and all these things. Let us get going. These are all the various applications of MEMS. I'm starting with the sensor applications. You can do pressure sensors, accelerometers, then inkjet printer type of applications, temperature sensors, displacement sensors, gas sensors. All these things can be done using MEMS. I have put some optical applications, like you can do adaptive optics, you can do free space optical communications on the chip, you can do laser cavity tuning, spectroscopy. All these things can be done with the MEMS, optical MEMS. I have also put optical switching devices, switches and routers are one of the more recent commercial applications of these optical MEMS, mainly for networking applications. Of course, I am not highlighting much, but there are a lot of biomedical applications. This fluidics belongs to that biomedical applications. Just as an example, I will be showing you an automobile application. So this is these circles are all dots where MEMS sensors have been embedded inside an automobile. In a modern automobile, you have a lot of sensors, like sensors in tire pressure monitoring. You have the fuel injection systems, you have windshield light control, and so many places. And proximity sensing. All these things can be done. They have been embedded in a modern car. And of course, you can see some of these pictures of these devices that have been placed. Similarly, this is a biomedical application where the spots in the human body where you can embed sensors. In fact, you can embed sensors inside the human body if necessary, and also on the surface. So non-invasive techniques are very, very popular and demanding. Many of the medical professions and the medical council, etc., regulations will need that you try to do external on the surface of the body, but of course it is possible to embed them inside the human body also, like the muscle strain control, heart pace monitoring systems, brain signals monitoring, and all these things. So you can see the example of a blood pressure sensor having a compartment to put your medicine. Also, you can read out the values, and you can also, there is what is called this drug delivery systems. So when the blood pressure goes beyond a certain value, it is possible to inject blood into the into the body. So all these things are coming up, but of course, this particular picture is somewhat more fictitious, just to illustrate. So, but the things are coming up. So defense are the people who are funding these programs. So there are a lot of applications to defense. These are all the list of applications of MEMS and MOEMS to defense. So I'll show you a few examples of MEMS devices and then go to how they're fabricated and so on. So these are all the devices that I will show you. Not all, but a few of them. So this is a rotational to vibrational motion device. You can see a wheel. Of course, all these are made on silicon and very small. I'll show you the dimensions also in a minute. And there is a vibrating shaft here. So when the wheel rotates, this can be coupled to the vibrating shaft, and the motion can be converted between rotational to linear motion. You also see some two dust mites here. You know that the size of the dust mites is very, very small, sub-millimeter size, or even some hundreds of microns. So these are of that size. Entire thing can come to less than a millimeter. Similarly, gear is a very useful mechanism in machines. And you can see this converts motion from one part of the machine to another part of the machine. All these wheels and toothed wheels. You can see the teeth of these wheels. So this will demonstrate what is the fineness of lithography. How will you make such a very, very fine device is what we should think when we see such a mechanism. So this is a pop-up micromirror switch. And of course, this is the top one is the logo of DARPA. And this blackish one is the actual mirror. It can lie flat or pop up, depending on the voltage that you apply to this mirror. And it can deflect the light 90 degrees. Instead of going straight, the light will deflect 90 degrees when it falls on this. So you can make optical clocks by such a mechanism. So optical clocks will be very, very useful in many applications. Like you must have come across rotating wheels in the measurement of velocity of light, etc. So this can be used to make digital optics. You can imitate electronic functions in optical domain by using these optical clocks. So this is the example of micromirrors that have been made by Lucent Technologies for networking applications. All these circles are all mirrors, gold-plated mirrors, each of the size of the needle size, very small. So people have made 256 by 256 and higher order mirror arrays, which can be used for networking applications. I'll show you a few pictures as we go along. So this is a close-up of a single micromirror. You have a mirror mounted on a ring, which is once again mounted on another ring outside, and all these rings can move. So they can rotate in some angle. So you can have a theta and 5 degrees of motion. You can rotate the beam within a certain cone. So the electrodes and all these actuation mechanisms will be there on the substrate and all these other electrodes, etc., that you may observe on this. So let us quickly look at what are the various fabrication processes that you will encounter when you are dealing with MEMS and MOEMS. So of course, originally people have started with mechanical machining, single point machining. That's what they did, like what people do in the diamond jewelry shops. And bulk micromachining, I have mentioned that you can etch out chemically the silicon to make whatever structure you want. And then surface micromachining is a more sophisticated mechanism. I'll show you an example to make more sophisticated devices like motors and so on. LEGO is a German process which combines all these things. MEMS, I mentioned already that in US, multi-user MEMS processing facility. And of course, you should also think about in the technology, you should think about high density packaging. And also you have to test and measurement and reliability and all these things will be very important. So these are all the various processes that you will, of course, develop and you will find in the technology. So this will illustrate the broadly what is this microfabrication process. There are three broad steps, you can say. This yellowish one is the design and CAD tools process. These are the middle one is the actual fabrication process involving starting with the silicon substrate. You deposit several layers, do lithographically pattern transfer, etch out unnecessary regions, and you repeatedly do this many times to find out the final device. And last step, of course, is the packaging and inspection and cutting into small pieces and all those things. So let me one little bit more highlight on this design phase, because that is very relevant for our people immediately. Even though, of course, these are also important, but immediately if someone wants to get into the subject, design is a very quick thing. And of course, some jobs are there in MEMS in the design. So if you learn some tools, CAD tools, then it will benefit. You can also do some consulting if necessary. And it will start with the original concept. See, conceptually, there's a difficulty in this MEMS because you will have to combine mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and if you are doing optical engineering. So you have to learn the techniques of all these three fields. That is the first difficulty that anyone will face, because in many colleges and institutes, all these are different subjects. One doesn't know the other domain. So we'll have to learn. Otherwise, of course, you can collaborate with your colleagues and then try to develop, if you want to develop these things. So a lot of CAD tools are there. That's what I said. Some of them are freeware also is available on the web now. There are a lot of commercial ones also. But the goal of all these design process is to generate masks. You will require several masks to fabricate these devices. So I'll show in a minute. So these are all the various fabrication processes that you will encounter. Thin film process, photolithographic processes, selective etching, and then auto assembly. These are all the various processes that you will find. They have also been categorized like physical deposition, chemical deposition. Lithography is also many types are there now. Electron beam lithography. Photolithography is of course the conventional one. And of course it is getting improved. And there is electron beam lithography, ion beam lithography, focused ion beam techniques. These are all the techniques that are being used. Nowadays you also have the maskless. You can directly write from a computer design onto the wafer. Direct writing techniques, what are called. You also have these etching processes, which are important in the MEMS. Similarly, this auto assembly is a unique process for MEMS. You cannot assemble a MEMS device like a wristwatch. You cannot make separate parts and then assemble one by one. So this auto assembly will be useful. By the time you come to all the 14 steps or whatever number of steps, your device will have to be ready. I'll show you an example. So this is an example of making a cantilever beam-based device on silicon. So this is a cross-section. What you are seeing is a cross-section. You please consider the last picture. So this is what we would like to make. You have a silicon wafer on which you make waveguides. You can say this greenish one is the waveguide of oxide and nitride combinations. And there's a gap in between the waveguide. If the light falls from the input region to the output region, it has to pass through this gap. And if there is a mismatch, if there's a force on top of one of these arms, then there's a mismatch and the amount of light will reduce. So you can calibrate the intensity of light output with the force on this top of this cantilever beam. I just want to illustrate the fabrication side, not the function of this now. So you start with a double coated silicon and then etch out a diaphragm for a small region, say 20 microns or so. You can use KOH, dilute KOH to etch out these silicon. SiO2 will act as a stoppant. Yes, SiO2 is hard and you cannot etch SiO2 easily. Then, of course, you can coat a thin layer of oxynitride for the cladding region, and then you use an aluminum mask, metal mask, to punch through a hole. You can resist this, and you call what is called this deep reactive ion etching is used to etch out thoroughly to entire thing. So these are the steps involved. You start with the oxide coating, then etching out, then the deposition of oxides, then the position of other layers, and separating out the regions using the masks, and then finally the etching out. These are the various processes involved in making this. This is a typical one called bulk micromachining. Here you use the silicon itself as the structural material. This is called the surface micromachining. This can be more sophisticated. I'm showing you a small example. You have the silicon wafer, on top of which this is also cross section what you are seeing, on the top of which you want to make a polysilicon cantilever beam like this. So you start with a silicon wafer, thin layer of nitride for adherence, then a layer of sacrificial layer of oxide. This reddish one is oxide, and one thin layer of polysilicon of whatever dimension you want, and then finally etch out this sacrificial oxide. This is an important feature of this surface micromachining. So repeated use of lithography and oxidation and etching out is an important feature of surface micromachining. And here the polysilicon is the structure, not the silicon. This is the important feature of this surface micromachining process. So this is an example of a more sophisticated device, like the motor that you have seen in the beginning. This is typical of MUMS. I've taken this from that. This cross, all this is again cross section. You see that motor is, this is the rotating region, and fix it. I mean, this will prevent the motor from ejecting out, and this reddish one is the motor. And this also will prevent you from moving out. So just to illustrate the processes, if you want to make this, you have to start with a silicon wafer with thin layer of nitride, and then first layer of poly. And then you start with the first layer of oxide, sacrificial oxide. This yellowish one is the oxide, and two dents are made using lithography. And then you coat a layer of, next layer of red colored poly 1. This is poly 0, poly 1. And then another layer of oxide, and etch out this yellowish thin region here to make one more layer of poly, and so on. By the time you come to the last step, and of course you etch out unnecessary regions, and finally you get to this motor. Only few steps I'm showing here. This is how it is made. That's what I meant by auto assembly. So there's nothing like making separately and then assembly. So it's a more sophisticated one. There will be many steps, maybe 24 steps or 28 steps to make a motor. And of course, a lot of other features are there, like you have to do the alignment, you have to do the carefully etching out. So many important features will be there in this. So this is another example of a micromirror structure. You can also imagine how this is made by using the surface micromachining process. Okay, I will not highlight too much. So let us go to what are called guided wave optical MEMS. Until now, we have seen devices and their fabrication, etc. I will show you some optical devices. Important feature in this is waveguides. Light propagates in optical waveguides, and it can be controlled by using the MEMS structures. That's what is meant by real optical MEMS. This is what the interest of our lab also here. You can use it for communication applications, sensor applications, and so on. So this is a broad categorization of MEMS devices, optical MEMS devices. They can be broadly classified for communication or networking applications, and then the power control applications. So you can do the wavelength switching by using optical MEMS. That's what is given for networks. You can use them for network protection, wavelength routing and switching, and so on. You see many examples here. 2x2 fiber optic switch is this one. This is optical switch for optical add drop multiplexing. This one is for the mirrors I showed earlier. And then this is called a variable optical attenuator made by Kronos for controlling the intensity of the light. So this is an example, another example called micro-optical bench. By the end of last century, people have made this micro-optical bench on a silicon wafer. The right picture will show that. It has come in IEEE proceedings in some 1996 or so. So you can see this is a left side is a conventional optical bench where you have all these stands. You can put the beam splitters, lenses, and all these things. This is a laser, and all these things you can also control mechanically. by micro adjustment, micro stages, what are these called, and you can do an experiment in a lab. But this is on a silicon wafer of the size of a millimeter. You can, once again, you see all these stands, beam splitter, this, what is this called, this Fresnel lens, all these things are available on the silicon, and it is very, very small. You can translate this, but of course there are a lot of limitations. On silicon, you cannot make lasers and some active devices, but there are a lot of, you see this vibration problems, alignment problems, and all are solved by going for this. Of course, the fabrication you can think of once again using the methods that I have described earlier. So a lot of advantages, you can use them in the fields. And in future, of course, this is still somewhat bulky only. They are not on the waveguides. So in future, you can expect very, very small optical devices on the chip. So these are the various components that people have made on the optical bench, like the mirrors, beam splitters, lenses, and the middle ones are actuators to move or control these devices. And the entire systems also are shown here. I'll illustrate one example maybe later. So this is a 1D scanner made at UCLA. It has got a vertical scan of some 40 degrees and horizontal scan of some 30 degrees, and size also of the order of a fraction of a millimeter, 300 microns, etc. So you can combine these and then make scanners, displays, and so on and so forth. So this example I wanted to show you about fiber optic switch. This is a mirror that is placed in between. It can be pushed into the path of the fiber, and light will, instead of going straight like this, it will go in the perpendicular direction. Similarly, this shows the usage of the micro mirrors. You have micro mirrors placed like this in arrangement. You can program them whether to be active or not. And this, in the input, you have the fiber optic lines bringing in the light, and they can be sent to any of the output ports. You can program these mirrors such that whatever connectivity you can get. Of course, you cannot get all the possible connectivities. Okay. So a lot of different engineering problems are there. How to make bigger and bigger arrays with very small loss. Then how to fabricate them, how to test them, reliability issues. These are all the things that people are studying with respect to the micromirror cross connects and switches. So now I'll go to waveguide based devices. You can control the light propagating in optical waveguides to combine what is called this integrated optics and MEMS. Integrated optics is the subject like integrated electronics, where you have waveguides, and or you can make all the components necessary for a given application on a small wafer. So you can control the intensity, phase, polarization, direction of propagation, all these things when light is propagating in optical waveguides. You just remember, in fiber optics, you cannot control light. Only it is confined. The light can bend across the corners and all that, but you don't have much control in fiber optics. In the bulk optics also, it is very difficult. Even though you can control a little bit, you require high voltages to control these. In the integrated optics, you can more easily control these things. With the MEMS, you can control more. Whatever you have been doing in the bulk optics, you can get in the integrated optics. So this is an example of one of the earliest devices. The example I have shown you in the beginning for the fabrication. Of course, the gap is too much. This is not to the scale. You have a silicon micro cantilever beam and also an optical waveguide placed on this. This yellowish one is an optical waveguide. And there's a waveguide on the substrate or the other side also. So when the light goes from this side to this side, there will be a mismatch when there is force on top of this beam, and you can measure it at the output. Similarly, you have this is a cross-section of an evanescent field-based device. As you know, evanescent fields devices are very, very sensitive. You can use for many applications. Here, what I'm showing is coupling from the beam into the substrate. This top grayish region is the cantilever beam. It has to be anchored at this point, and this is a substrate. So you can guide the beam from, you can tunnel the beam from the cantilever beam to the waveguide. So this is an example of a device that we made in our lab long ago. One of our students, Dr. Patnaik, now he's in BITS Hyderabad. He has worked on this optical MEMS pressure sensor. What you see is an interferometer. This is a top view of an interferometer, Mach-Zehnder interferometer this is called. You have waveguide and a branching waveguides here. You have a combiner here, and there are two arms of the interferometer. And the idea here is you make a cantilever beam just below one arm of the interferometer. Just below one arm of the interferometer, if you make a cantilever, you can see in this picture, this is a cross section. So just below this arm, there is a beam. That means this whole thing is about 20 microns or 30 microns. And if there is a uniform pressure on top of this, only this waveguide is affected. So the refractive index of this waveguide changes. Length also changes a little bit, but refractive index based on the pressure, this is called elasto-optic effect, will influence the light propagation in this. So there's a phase shift here compared to this. And due to the phase shift, you can measure what is the intensity output at this point. So that is a basic idea. If you want to solve this or analyze this, like what Patnaik did, of course, nowadays you have a lot of software tools. You have to, just for interest's sake, I would like to show you some equations so that people who are interested can work on some of these subjects. So this is a broad analysis methodology. You have to solve the mechanical equations for the cantilever beam or whatever microstructure that you are choosing. Then you have to relate these stresses with optical properties like refractive index. Elasto-optic effect will influence your refractive index based on the stress. And of course, you have to solve the optical wave propagation in this interferometer or directional coupler or whatever device that you are choosing. These are the 4 steps involved in the analysis. Just to show you a few equations, you can, these are equations for the mechanical analysis. Of course, these are del square, del power 4 equation. And you have all these coefficients, various coefficients of the structure. Like they will have the Young's modulus, then the structural parameters and the shape and all those things. That means these DH, etc. are not constants. X and Y, they depend on X and Y, let us say, is the in plane. And right hand side is the perturbation, pressure, or whatever you want. So if you want to solve this, there are a lot of techniques in mathematics. Of course, you will need these boundary conditions. And this is the omega is the displacement. This has been put in the form of displacement. You can convert it in the form of the stress variations and finally solve for the mechanics of this diaphragm. These are some parameters. Of course, this is the technique that we have used. You can solve by using a standard procedure, simply supported beam, and then you can divide it due to moment, solution due to the moments distributed across, allowing the edges and all that. And of course, these are all the stress relations. You can, once you find the displacement, you can find out what are the stresses involved. And of course, this is the optical analysis. You have to relate to the phase shift. So this is the intensity variation in interferometer. You have the cos square variation. Phase change is related to the intensity variation. And this phase is dependent on the length variation as well as the variation, the propagation constant. This propagation constant contains the refractive index. 2 pi by lambda into refractive index is beta. So refractive index changes and so the phase will change. So you finally relate to all these things, length change, phase change, etc. and find out what is the performance of the, how light propagates and performance of the device. So this is the expressions for the mechanical coupling for TE modes, TM modes, etc. You have to work out. There you have all these coefficients, C1, C2, etc. or the photoelastic coefficients. This will result in refractive index which is varying with XYZ. See, earlier we thought that refractive index is a constant inside the waveguide or on the substrate, but it's not so because of the mechanics. You know that the mechanics will show you a vibrating diaphragm. So the refractive index is a variable. So you have to solve all that. So this is the sensitivity expression, rate of change of the phase with impressed pressure. So these are all the parameters we used. We used a thick diaphragm, 50 microns, length of the arms of the interferometer of 5 millimeters, and all that. So these are the MATLAB or Mathematica curves that Mr. Patnaik has generated. This is what you can see, that these are refractive index variations. There are some very odd shapes depending on the vibration in diaphragm. So this is like a problem of variable refractive index, like light propagation in atmosphere. So the refractive index is varying. That's how, that is the complication. But of course, you can solve it. It's not very difficult. So this is a response curve, you can say, that the normalized phase change with respect to the impressed pressure. Roughly, you can say that about 100 microradians will result, phase shift will result by applying a kilopascal of pressure. That is a range of values that you can measure, and of course it's different for TE modes, TM modes and all that. You have to choose properly, you have to design the waveguides and so on. So you have a lot of CAD tools available nowadays. They are all the CAD tools that are available for, of course nowadays they are available in IISc also. You have the Coveterware is an important tool. Then there's what is called this IntelliSuite. Sometimes these people conduct a lot of workshops. ANSYS, many people know, all the mechanical engineers use ANSYS for their applications. Then you have COMSOL, which does multiphysics. BPM CAD is a tool for light propagation. Zemax is for lens design and all that. So there are all the various tools that are available for these applications. Of course, a lot of tools available freely on the web also. So then I'll show you a few more examples before concluding. So these are, you see, earlier we have talked about the cantilever beam and waveguide and all that. Instead of a, you can have a diaphragm. Diaphragm also I have shown you. Instead of having an optical waveguide, you can have a directional coupler. There are two waveguides very, very close together. And you put this directional coupler at the base of the cantilever beam. You know that from mechanics, you will know that the stress is maximum at this point. Displacement is maximum at the edge, but stress is maximum at the boundaries. So the tunneling from one waveguide to other waveguide is controlled by this stress. So it is very, very sensitive. So you can also have measurements across the cantilever beam and so on. So these are some of the ideas that if someone wants to explore, people have not done much work on these things. You can also, analysis also is possible. So once again, you can do like what we did earlier. You take an appropriate dynamics, and in this particular case, if you want to do a vibration sensor, you have to do a harmonic analysis like what we do in control systems. So all the knowledge that you know in electronics and electrical engineering can be applied to these things. You have to combine. In fact, a lot of mathematics is already available. We have to see what is appropriate for a given application. So these are the expressions for the directional coupler moment. It is called the coupled mode theory. And finally, you get what is the field variation with some approximations and all that. So these are some response curves. The fundamental mode frequency for various lengths of cantilever beam is what is plotted. So these are force application of force applied and refractive index change. So typically you have 1% change in the refractive index for forces of the orders of some 100 micronewtons. Hundreds of micronewtons. It is also possible to do a lot of refinement. Sub-micronewton force also can be sensed by using such devices. So these are all various percentage change in the coupler output for various spacings and all that. So there are a lot of other applications I have in the slides. We can look at, instead of a diaphragm, you have a cantilever beam coupled to a interferometer here. This work is done by Dr. Jagannath Naik, who was a research student in our lab. He was deputed from DRDO labs and he's worked on optical MEMS accelerometers. So I'll show you some results of his. These are all the various configurations that you can use to analyze. So this is a double MZI configuration. So these are some typical specs of accelerometers that are required for automobile applications and navigation applications. You can go up to sub-micro G. G is the acceleration due to gravity. The range of values can go up to that much values. And sensitivity is also of the orders of very small, 0.1% also. You can get resolutions of the orders of a few micro Gs possible. Frequency range of operations is given. And temperature variation also is given here. So I will not touch too much upon these. So all these have got mechanical analysis. You see, by the time when Dr. Naik was working, all these COMSOL and ANSYS were available. And so he was able to generate a lot of these graphs of, these are all mechanical variations. Refractive index variation across different types of bridges and all that. I'll show you some summary of his work. This is for acceleration, different phase changes and so on. So noise analysis also is important because the different types of noise are available here. Because there are a lot of errors in the fabrication, then the air itself will deflect a little bit. It will act on some additional perturbation it does force. And like what you do in electronics, you can do noise analysis and see what is the effect on the sensitivity. So these are all the plots of sensitivity. So this is a summary comparison of different accelerometers. He has done what are called non-uniform beam accelerometers. See, earlier I have shown you uniform beam. I think the picture is not, I moved very fast. You were not able to make the non-uniformity. You have a cantilever beam. At the edge of it, you have more mass. So it will deflect more and stress will be more at the base. Because the range will reduce. So these are the results for the uniform beam, 3 millimeters, 4 millimeters, 5 millimeters, and then with different techniques by analytical techniques by ANSYS and so on. Of course, I think they have also started experimenting. I'm not showing you any fabricated results here, but recently we were able to fabricate some of these structures. This is non-uniform beam analysis results. So these are the various performance characteristics for different types of accelerometers. Starting with, you see, if you are, just as an example, if you are trying to look at an accelerometer, there are force balancing accelerometers, vibrating beam accelerometers, fiber optic accelerometers, SAW devices, bulk MEMS, then MOEMS 1 and 2. There's what is called the closed loop operation. You apply the field such that the cantilever beam doesn't move. So the amount of force, amount of voltage that you applied will be a measure of the sensitivity. So closed loop will result in very good sensitivity, and also it will also increase the life of this device, so that because it doesn't move. But of course it is trained. That's an important thing. I think that's all I wanted to present. Of course, I have a lot more results and analysis because we have time crunch. I will conclude at this and say that presently most of the MEMS involves bulk optics, like cantilever beams, then the mirrors, and so on and so forth. But in future, we should think of MOEMS devices based on optical waveguides, like more modern devices, modern optical devices like ring resonators, photonic bandgap structures, and all these things can be used to as a optical device. And mechanical device, of course, also can be innovated. If you collaborate with the mechanical departments, they will suggest more and more recent mechanical devices which can be combined with these. And of course, I would like to say that there are now software available, and fabrication facilities are available, and it's a very good scenario. Now, of course, we'll have to improve a lot, particularly in India. A lot more improvement is needed. Users are needed. Industry is needed. Then we can say that this will be useful. But of course, from academic point of view, I can say this is very interesting and a lot of scope for those who want to do PhD and those who want to take up projects. Thank you very much for listening. I think I'll conclude at this, and I'll take a few questions if someone has.
Thank you, Professor.
These are some references. A lot of literature is available. I hope many of you know about these, because this is a photonics conference, FDP. I would like to mention about the IEEE Photonics Society. I suppose some of you are members. So if someone is interested in international, what are latest developments happening in photonics, and also in particular optical MEMS, I would suggest you to become members of IEEE Photonics Society. There are several journals, like Journal of MEMS is there, Journal of Special Topics in Quantum Electronics, Journal of Right Wave Technology. All these will publish a lot of information for optical communications, sensors, and so on and so forth. So there are also many special issues, and I would suggest you to, if you want to form IEEE students branch or Photonics Society chapter, we'll be able to help you. There are a lot of chapters now in India. There's a lot of, for example, in Tamil Nadu, they have started about 12 chapters this year. Last year in Bangalore section, we started about 8 chapters in photonics, students chapters, I mean. You can also think of local section chapters and all these things. For those who are interested, you can be in touch with us. And also Dr. Srikanth is there here. He knows, he has been working in this for a long time, and he has been active volunteer. So you can ask him also in the next lecture. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Srinivas, for the wonderful talk. And as you have rightly said, that there is a lot of scope in this area. MEMS, particularly you were talking about optical switching and MOEM pressure sensors, and now this is the era of sensors, and we are lacking facilities as well in this area. And second, thank you very much for encouraging to open a chapter in this area. In South, I see that there are many chapters in photonics, and North is lacking behind. So this time, I have a lot of people who have joined this FDP program. Or those who are interested, they may they may show their interest. Then we can start IEEE chapter in this uh, institution from here. I can coordinate it, and I'll be certainly taking help of you and Professor Shrikant. Thank you very much for nice talk. Any questions from the audience? I can see in the chat box no questions. Either the participants have understood each and everything, or they are still to understand it. So, any questions still? No. Okay. Let us thank Professor Srinivas, and thank you for sparing your valuable time for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Now, may I request Dr. Shrikant, if he is ready, because we are before time, can he be available for talk? Dr. Shrikant. Dr. Shrikant, are you listening me?
He said he is muted.
He has muted. If he can start, so we can start before time. Then we will be having more time during lunch.
Yeah, I think, am I audible now? Professor Mohanji?
Yes, very well
Yeah.
audible.
Actually, wonderful talk by Professor Srinivas sir.
Yeah.
I was there in the talk. Actually, I muted it
Yeah.
disturbance. And today, actually, I am sitting because of Corona. I have not gone to institute today because in my lab there are 8 students are working in this area.
Okay.
So normally I don't visit too much of lab because I am 50 plus now. We are more vulnerable for Corona, and my lab is next to my room.
Okay.
So that's why I think I made my studio only. I have got 300 Mbps leased line from GeoFiber. I think I'm audible, Professor Devendra Mohanji.
Yes, very well audible.
Yeah, if we start early, I think there is no issue from your side.
Okay.
I'm ready with my slides.
And I can introduce you and we can start.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Okay, let me give 1 second so that I read your citation, and then I'll request you. Okay, well, we have with us Dr. P.C. Shrikant. He had his schooling in the same town and graduated in electronics and communication engineering in '87 from Malland College of Engineering, Hassan. He's from Hassan. It's a beautiful place. I have heard about it. Sometimes I would like to visit. Securing a first class with distinction. He has completed his MTech degree in 1996 from IIT Kanpur in the area of lasers and obtained his PhD from VTU Belgaum. He worked in the Applied Photonics Lab, IISc Bangalore, during his PhD. Starting as lecturer in 1987, he became assistant professor in 1999, professor in 2011 in Malland College of Engineering, Hassan. He has a deep involvement in optical networks, was awarded a top 100 engineers 2011 by International Biographical Center, St. Thomas Place, Great Britain. He was selected for Marie Curie's Who is Who in Science and Engineering. And also in 2016 to 17, New Providence, USA. He received Best Paper Award for the following papers. I don't think that I am going to read the papers titles, but he has been a good stature of international repute, and he has been working in the area of optical networks, and he is associated with IISc Bangalore, and he has been awarded Outstanding Scientist in the field of photonics by Venus International Foundation, CARD, and he received Albert Nelson Marie Curie Lifetime Achievement Award from Marie Curie, Who is Who. So his area of interest, lasers and quantum electronics. He has guiding more than 100 BE, MTech and PhD projects. He has so far published more than 150 papers in national and international journals and conferences. He has attended many international conferences. Not only attended, but he must have been at the key positions. So he has organized many international conferences. So I welcome Dr. P.C. Shrikant for his
Thank you.
talk. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Devendra Mohanji. First of all, I think before I start, I'll share my slide.
Yeah.
Can you see my slide?
Yes, it's visible. Photonic crystal and its applications.
Yeah, thank you very much. So first of all, I would like to thank Devendra Mohanji for having given me an opportunity to give a invited talk for this FTP. In fact, I had to come to Hisar. Due to COVID, we are not able to meet each other, and we have met Devendra Mohanji many times in many international conferences like that. I mean, like FDPs and all those things. And he had to come to my place for one of my PhD student examiner. He could not come to my place. Anyhow, after Corona is over, I think that surely Dr. Devendra Mohanji will be visiting our institute, as well as we will be going to Devendra Mohanji's place. So, and also I would like to thank the whole organizers of the Guru Jambeshwar University, Hisar, and faculty of physics. And I think I would also like to express my gratitude to the wholeheartedly to the whole organizers of this event. And of course, it is an ACT event. It's good that many participants are there. I also welcome the participants for this talk. So with that one, I would start directly with the sensors. Incidentally, am I audible, Sir Devendra Mohanji?
Yes,
Hello?
very well audible. Yes,
Okay.
very well audible.
If there is some problem, I think please interrupt me. Okay.
Okay.
So basically, today I am going to deal with photonic crystals. We are doing a lot of simulation and all those things in my lab. Few of my research students, they are doing very reasonably well in the area of sensors. Of course, we are doing something about quantum communication also. I'll at the end of my slide, I'm going to tell. I think this session, I have got, I can take more time. And one more thing which I'd like to tell you, I'll go a little bit in depth into the sensors and how waveguide, how photonic crystal waveguide functions, and also how it can be used as a sensors, and those things I'll be dealing from the low level to a little bit higher level. I have got a few mathematics. I think in this at this point, if someone is interested, I think I can go through the mathematics. Otherwise, I'll skip the mathematics and directly go into this photonic crystals, and especially for this faculty development program, because as I have seen, few people may be starting their journey in photonics. And at this point of time, I'd like to tell, most of the fabrication of part of it has been covered by Dr. Srinivas sir and Dr. Gopalagade sir. And after my talk, I think Dr. Venkatesh will be covering entirely about how you can do the programming and can get the results using numericals. Okay. So with that one, actually, I'm filling the middle gap for this photonic crystal, and I'll just go to directly into the okay. So this is my outline of talk. How photonic crystal works, and applications. What are the applications? Of course, applications have many. Photonic crystal ring resonator, design and modeling of photonic crystal ring resonator, temperature sensor design method, FTTD method, simulation results, analysis of fluoride contents in water. Some of the results which we have obtained in our lab, I'm going to tell, and finally I'm going for a conclusion part of it. So I think all of us see about it. Why this fellow is showing a butterfly? He must be a mad fellow to show a butterfly in a faculty development program. Of course, there is a lot of relationship between this butterfly and our photonic crystals. So wings of this one color, you can see, I think in this one I have picked up some, I think yellow, light yellow, and then black and white colors. This is the one which we are going to deal with these photonic crystals. So you can see how we have derived the photonic crystal from this one. Definitely the feathers of peacock and all those things I'm going to tell in the coming time. Just now I'll just tell all these things. So look at it. We will be seeing a lot of colors. This color is actually how we will get the colors means. This is a photonic band gap. How we have got electronic band gap? That means we have a filter, band reject filter. In that band reject filter, from lower cutoff to higher cutoff frequency, the whole thing will not be passed and they will be stopped. Here also in the photonic band gap, from certain wavelength to certain wavelength, the light will not be passed. Instead, they will be reflected. The reflection will be in the form of colors. So this, why we are getting this kind of colors is because of periodic variation of the refractive indices. And we know that one. The main thing in photonics is we deal with completely with refractive indices. We are completely dependent on refractive indices. You can see here, wings are the result of naturally occurring periodic microstructure. The periodic microstructure in the butterfly wings results in the photonic band gap, which prevents the propagation of certain bands. That's what I told. It will prevent certain bands that will be reflected. This light is reflected back as seen as a bright color. So this is how we are going for photonic crystal. This is the thing which we are going to deal, how the photonic crystal is, we are dealing with the photonic crystal and how we are designing and how we are fabricating and all those things. In the coming slides, I'm going to discuss about these things. So I have already told what is a photonic band gap. A photonic band gap is a crystal, is a structure that would manipulate the beam of light in the same way semiconductor control the electric current. That's what we have, that electronic band gap, and this is what the photonic band gap. A semiconductor cannot support electrons or the energy lying in the electronic band gap. In the electronic band gap, it cannot control the energy. Similarly, a photonic band gap, photons lying in the photonic band gap. So by preventing or allowing the light to propagate through a crystal, light processing can be done. So this is what I already told, and just I read it. And of course, all of us we know about. We started with the invention of laser by Theodore Maiman, and he invented the laser in 1960s. And later, before the invention of this laser, they have invented fiber optic cable by Charles Cao. He had to wait until the invention of laser for propagation of light through a fiber optic cable. So first of all, I am just going through the just brief history about it. So we have a optical fiber, and optical fiber, all of us know about it. It guides the light in by using total internal reflection. And the main thing which we have to solve the equation is Maxwell's equation. All the things what we are doing now is completely dependent on this electromagnetic wave theory. Second guide is dielectric wave guide. This is much earlier to our what you call optical fiber wave guide. And of course, what I'm dealing is the third one is the photonic crystal wave guide. So as Professor Srinivas sir told about, we cannot bend the light in case of fiber optic cable through 90 degrees. If you bend the fiber optic cable, there will be a huge loss. I think we may lose the complete signal or the light after it reaches the critical radius. That's why in photonic crystal waveguide, there is no issue at all. Even in surface plasma resonance also, there is no issue at all. We can bend through 90 degrees. So I think this is what actually we have done in that one. So before we go back in depth into the theory of photonic crystals, you can see drawbacks of dielectric waveguides. Laser in size, larger in size, this is the dielectric waveguides, and could not transmit light. I have already told, through a sharp 90 degrees band. We have a diffraction limit. That's the biggest threat in this waveguide, that dielectric waveguides. So advantages of photonic crystals. So we know that one waveguide, reduced absorption loss. Absorption loss is very much less when compared to dielectric waveguides. Reduced non-linearity effects. So we know that one non-linearity effects are very much there in optical fiber communication, and that can be reduced in photonic crystals. Then we can go for high power transmission. We can have more power and can guide light through a sharp 90 degrees band, which you can see in the which you can see in the slide. Okay. So next, I'd like to go for next slide. Yeah, just I'd like to give a few. I think this is for the beginners, not for the persons who are experts in the field. You can see just have made some animation on my own. This is my perception. This is what actually I have filled a pure water in a waveguide, say container. Then, so actually afterwards, I have an optical source. Then after an optical source, I should have an optical detector. Then I will pass the light through it. It will go through this pure water, and you are going to see a spectra like this, the wavelength which is there. So this, I think you can see the blue color light, and the wavelength is, I think, blue. I think I made it myself. This is for the sake of understanding purpose. Next, I will fill this with the contaminated water. So contaminants with maybe fluoride contamination. This we have done it in our lab. I will show the results also. Then I will pass the light, and that light will be detected by the optical detector. You can see red light is coming. There is an evident phase shift in the wavelength, evident wavelength shift from the previous one. Previous one, for pure water, we have blue wavelength, and for fluoride contaminated water, we get red. I mean, I'm not telling you this is exactly the wavelength, but I'm just telling different colors for your for the sake of understanding. Similarly, this is a fluoride contaminated water, and one more slide, the same thing, but it's a blood. So non-infected blood sample, and optical source, and finally optical detector. We are going to pass the light through the optical source, and you are going to get some light green for non-infected blood sample. Then later we will fill this with infected blood sample. Finally, it may be infected with different virus or different bacteria or anything. So ultimately, at the end point of the detector, you are going to get different wavelength if it is infected. So like exactly, there is an evident wavelength shift you can see clearly in the slide. So depending upon the wavelength shift, we are going to decide which type of bacteria, which type of virus is invaded into the bloodstream. Okay, so this is what actually, in a nutshell, the whole photonic crystal behaves like that. So I think this slide is more informative for the beginners. So now, this is what actually we will be dealing with the photonic crystals. We are having the how a crystal is how a crystal is formed. So we are going to have two types of crystal. So one is depends on the various parameters. One is this one is called rods in air. Then these are holes in some material, maybe substrate. So these are all different structures. And here you can have square type structure, lattice structure, hexagonal lattice, or honeycomb. You can have your own, even triangular lattice also you can go. It depends on you how we can define. And we have got refractive index, contrast, and filling ratio. All these things we need to study about it before venturing into do research in the area of photonic band gap crystals. So now, how a photonic band gap crystal works, I think it's a very elementary thing. For of course, for the beginners, it is required. We have got one-dimensional, two-dimensional, and three-dimensional photonic crystals. You can see in the first figure, you have one-dimensional variation. You can see that green, blue, green, blue, green, blue. That means periodic variation of the refractive index only in the x direction. I think if I am showing my cursor, I think you can see that one. If you can see that my cursor, the variation, the periodic variation of refractive index is only in x direction. But coming to the 2D crystals, in the 2D crystals, you can see this one is blue and light blue, light blue. So that is periodic variation is in x direction. Once again, periodic variation in y direction. So here in two direction, we have got periodic variation in refractive index. If you pass a light through it, it encounters this periodic variation in refractive index. If I pass a light through it, it will come out here. So here in 3D, you can see here, you have got the periodic variation in x direction, periodic variation in y direction, and periodic variation in Z direction also. So this is how we can have periodic variation of refractive index in 1 dimension, in 2 dimension, and in 3 dimension. We call it as respectively 1-dimensional photonic crystals, 2-dimensional photonic crystals, and 3-dimensional photonic crystals. So now coming to it, the same thing, how we are launching the light in 1-dimensional, 2-dimensional, and 3-dimensional. That's a little bit different figure, but how we are launching the light. So now, once again, this photonic crystal, we can create a lot of temperature sensor, pressure sensor, or we have biosensor. So once again, I have shown rods in clearly rods in air structure and holes in some materials. It may be so. This is the distance between one rod to another rod, filling ratio. Then what type of lattice? This hexagon lattice or this one square lattice, we can tell about it. So now coming to the, so whatever we have done in the previous thing, there is absolutely completely packed photonic crystal, no defect in it. So now we are going for what is known as defect engineering. So this is known as defect engineering. So in this, what we can do is, we can, this is a rod structure, rod type of structure in the air. I can remove the whole complete red one is there. No, I can remove the whole line. So if I remove the whole line, it will be like a line defect. Or if I remove just one rod, it is nothing but a point defect. So that is the difference between a line defect and a point defect. Clearly, I have shown it in X, Y, and Z coordinate system, Cartesian coordinate system. And also in this one, you need not have to remove for the line defect. You can either remove or you can change the dimension of this size of the I think you can change the dimensions of the rods. You can change the dimensions of the rod. Either you can make it larger or you can make it smaller. Here also, that line defect and point defect can be definitely created. Fine. I think I'll go to the next slide. I think this is the most important slide. So here, what is defect engineering? We are going to take the advantage of the photonic band gap crystal defect. We actually create the defect. So you can see from this figure, it's a point defect. You can, I think I have removed only one rod from this structure. Next, after removing the rod, you can see here. So this is a perfect before removing the rod. I have before removing the rod. So what type of graph we are going to get? You can see this is a graph of normalized frequencies transmission. You can see from this point to this point, the whole thing is blocked. So this is what is known as stop band. See, this is what is called as band gap. A periodic array of dielectric cylinders in air forming two-dimensional band gap. A transmission spectrum of this, that is, here it will stop from 0.2 to 22 micrometers to 0.38 micrometers. So from 0.2 to 0.38 microns, the whole light band will be stopped, and this is known as stop band. You can see clearly, light will not be passed through this band for a perfect non-defective photonic crystal. Okay. Now, if I go for the another one, so here we have created a small. I have taken out a one what you call rod, and this is nothing but what is called as point defect. Can you see in this one evident pass by? I mean resonant frequency. You can see only one. So that means it can cause it can pass only one resonant frequency. And this is how this can be used for our sensing purpose. So I'll read out this one. A defect is introduced into the system by removing one of the cylinders. This will lead to localization of mode in the gap. That is most important at the defect side. It is seen that some transmission peak is observed in the forbidden band. See, this is a band gap, but still we are getting the one peak, and this is the resonant frequency. This corresponds to the defect state, which leads to the spatial localization of the light and has useful application in making a resonant cavity. If we make the resonant cavity, definitely we can use this as a sensor for various applications. This is the main theme behind photonic band gap crystal. Right. So this is a line defect. I am going, and also we can we have done this one, of course. we can do this type of ring resonator. As all of us know about ring resonator, we have got two bus and we have got a ring. If I pass a light through it, if it is 100% coupled or resonating, the whole light will be coming out of output 3, okay, depending upon the resonating condition. Either we can have two bus or we can have only one bus. That we are going to see in the coming classes. And port 1, port 2, output port 4, port 3, and this is a backward transfer, this is a forward transfer. So at the resonance, if it is resonant, the whole input that is coming in port 1 can completely divert it into output port 3. And of course, I told you the application. This can be definitely this application is manifold. This kind of structure can be used in optical networks also as a switches. You can you can switch from one path to another path by using this. Light can be switched from one path to other path by using this ring resonator, by using photonic crystal. So this is what actually the photonic crystal ring resonator. You can see we can pass the light through this one, and light will go through this one, and there will be a resonating condition at the port output. You are going to get the light output. Here you can see we have got one line defect here, and also this is one more line defect. If I ask someone, they will tell it is a point defect. Of course, it is not a point defect. It is a line defect because we have removed one line in the form of a circle. So one bus and one circle. So outer rods, 4 rings, inner side circular ring. So this is one type of photonic crystal ring resonator. Structure is a combination of linear waveguide and a circular waveguide. I have already mentioned the PowerPoint. Carved in the photonic crystal, realized by removing a number of silicon rods in the photonic crystal structure, characterized by periodic distribution of the square cells of silicon rods in air. So, as Professor Srinivas already discussed about MEMS, I don't want to do too much about MEMS. See, MEMS are thermally unstable. It is high cost, high energy requirement also. They cannot measure temperature, pressure, humidity in sub-micron range. This is the most important thing. In sub-micron range, you cannot. And also thermally unstable and also high cost. But if you go for MOEMs, they are more stable alignment, thermal stability, low cost, low energy requirement, faster response, and compatibility with the fiber optic cable. So low cost, most important thing, and thermal stability. Okay, so these are all the advantage of MOEMs. Professor Srinivas has already told about what all these things, and of course application. It can be used as a polarizer, prism, beam, diffraction, hologram. So this is what actually you can see: waveguide, switching, resonant filter. There are many applications you can see through it. I already sent my slide to Professor Devendra Mohanji. I think if someone wants, you can give it to them. So this is the history. I don't want to go. I mean, just in the year 2008, a paper titled "A New Temperature Sensor Based on Fiber Bragg Grating in a Photonic Crystal Fibers." So this is the one which they have developed the photonic crystal using the fibers. So what we are using now is not fibers. We are using materials like silicon or third, fifth group element semiconductors. So then the invention of optical sensor by Clark and Lenens in 1962, it gained momentum. Of course, optical resonator can have been designed and analyzed using. So we have got directional couplers. In lab, we have done MZI also. We have done micro ring resonators, and different structures we have created in our lab beyond that one. So I am going to stress morely upon what all the results we got in my lab. I think, of course, I got a lot of results in my lab. So micro ring resonator based sensors have been reported with a good sensitivity and due to high quality factor resonant peak in the output spectra. The most important thing in the resonators, of course, all of us know that, I mean, we have to increase the quality factor as much as possible to get high resonance. We know that if the quality factor is high, a resonant condition will be extremely good and we'll get a very thin light output. So this is what actually we go for sensing of bioproteins, DNA application, and sense force and strain and pressure and aqueous environment. So I'll go to some of the thing which we have done. Now whatever I've told about the photonic crystal is completely the thing what we have the basics of the photonic crystal. So now I am going to tell one of the application design and simulation of the photonic crystal based ring resonator for temperature measurement. So in this one we have got reasonably good result. So objective I don't want to deal, and we have to use finite difference time domain method for solving Maxwell's equation. Of course, we know that one in the photonic crystal, the main thing which we are going to use is electromagnetic waves. It's a waveguide. The FDTD method is used to simulate VHC structure, and perfect matched layer is placed as the absorbing boundary condition. So this is PML layer should be placed while fabricating it. Fabrication, I think in the fabrication side, Professor Gopal Hegde he's completely working in the area of nano technology department in IISc Bangalore, and of course Srinivas sir has got his own lab. So they're fabricating few things. Of course, just now I spoke to Dr. Hegde, and he told that for fabricating it's not possible with the third and fifth group elements, maybe that indirect bandgap semiconductor. We don't have good fabs in our country. That's what we are lacking. So this is what actually how we are going to see the East lattice, how we can have the electromagnetic fields H, magnetic field H and electric field H in the direction of the X, Y, and Z coordinate system. And I don't want to, actually this is a thing, the basic Maxwell's equation. Here the time varying electromagnetic field obey the Maxwell's equation, which in the differential form as follows. Actually, we know that del dot H R comma T, del cross E R comma T. I don't want to read the next one. I'll just comment minus mu R H R of T dou by dou T. So like that, we have got 1, 2, 3, 4 equations. They are basic Maxwell's equation. So the main difference between the previous Maxwell's equation and this current Maxwell's equation. In the previous Maxwell's equation, we had only E of T. E is varying only with respect to T, but here E is a variable with respect to T, R and T. And of course, the main another thing is the epsilon, mu and sigma, that is permittivity, permeability and conductivity are variable. That is the most important thing we need to stress. That means to say this mathematics is little bit more complicated when compared to ordinary electromagnetic waves, because we have to take into account the variation of permittivity, permeability and conductivity with respect to R. That is the most important thing in this simulation, and also in mathematical modeling also we require the variation of epsilon, mu and sigma. So these are all the various Cartesian coordinate system equations for obtaining 6 coupled partial differential equation. Of course, I am not going in depth into the equation. You can see equation number 6, equation number 7, 8, 9, 10. So it is basically dealing with X, Y, and Z components of magnetic field and electric field intensity, E and H. And of course, we have done for different modes, TM mode. You can see this is the mathematics. And if sometime later, if someone is interested, I think they can directly contact me or mail me. I'll give you the mathematics of it sometime later, because I don't have much time in dealing the mathematics of it, and I think people may not be happy with the mathematics. Many, I think those who are deeply involved in, definitely they'll be happy, but those who are beginners, I'll give the mathematics of it in the coming hopefully in maybe some, I think my lectures are available in YouTube and all those things. You can see through that, and also you can mail me. So now, see, earlier we did not have, in our lab, we did not have numerical software. We used what is known as MEEP, MIT Electromagnetic Equation Propagation FDTD method. From this one we have done. And of course, the plotting for the output, we use the MATLAB. So this is what actually for everything. So this is modeling by varying the period. So I don't want to go in completely in depth into it. So this is a temperature sensor, and this is the air refractive index formula. So this is what actually, so A, B, C, D, and also temperature versus refractive index. And ultimately, these are all the mathematics of it. And these are all the curves which we got. And this is what means PCRR structure design model. And ultimately, simulation results, you can see, this is simulation result. And of course, in the next one, I'm going to see some more. You can see the shift in the frequency, shift in the wavelength. Depending upon the shift in the wavelength, we can tell what type of, how much temperature it is from the, this one. This I don't want, and these are the publication out of this temperature sensor and references I quote. So the next thing which we have done is fluoride content based in water using the photonic based biosensor. Of course, the basic idea behind is the same thing. We have to go for FDTD method, then we have to solve the Maxwell's equation. And all of us know about the fluoride content in water. It is very much harmful for human being. Nowadays, we have to dig the borewell. If you dig the borewell in deep, then we are going to have a lot of, in some places, a lot of fluoride content. So if we have got calcium fluoride, if it is contaminated with calcium fluoride, then we have dental fluorosis, cesium fluoride. The health effects may be nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and bleeding and coma, even to death. Potassium fluoride, depression, muscle weakness, heart rhythm disorder, and confusion, chronic diarrhea or kidney disease. Strontium fluoride disrupts infant hormonal development and infant growth. Lithium fluoride, like that, we have got a lot of complications using this kind of fluoride. Now, as soon as we dig the borewell, we need to find out whether that water is containing fluoride content. If it is containing fluoride content, then we need to clean that one. That means we need to refine that one and finally get the good drinking water, and ultimately it will not have any hazardous effect. We have to remove all those things. Once again, this one we have used earlier. It is one of the old thing, algorithm MEEP. Once again, I'll show one of this one. You can see here how the animation, how light is going launched from the left side of the waveguide. It is going through and ultimately it is coming out, and ring resonator is there. So likewise, we are getting the output. So whatever we are giving the input at this point, so it will be resonating, and the output we are going to get the peak of certain frequency or wavelength. So depending upon that one, we are going to measure what type of fluoride content it is there in the this one. Devendra Mohanji, you are viewing this one clearly, this animation?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
very much clear.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So now the transmission spectrum of the pure water, you can see. So if we send the pure water in this one, the previous one, the pure water I am sending through this waveguide, and I will be getting some peak wavelength. I am telling you that will be that I am going to show it in my table. Then you can see for calcium fluoride, the peak will be here. I will show the values. For cesium fluoride, the peak will be here. For lithium fluoride, the peak will be here. For potassium fluoride, the peak will be here. Fine. So for pure water, the peak frequency is 0.2955. This is the signature of the pure water. So we call that frequency or wavelength as signatures of pure water: calcium, cesium, lithium, potassium, strontium, fluoride. For calcium fluoride, the peak frequency is 0.2919. This is the signature of calcium fluoride, and the frequency shift is 0.0036. For cesium, the peak frequency, and this is known as cesium signature, 0.2733. It is 0.0222. That is the frequency shift. If it is lithium fluoride, 0.2923, and the wavelength shift is frequency shift is 0.0032. For potassium, the peak frequency or signature of the potassium fluoride, I have not written, it is the total fluorides. 0.2727 is the signature of the signature frequency of the potassium fluoride, and this one, the frequency shift is 0.022. So from this one, strontium also 0.2913 is the frequency signature of the strontium fluoride, and the wavelength frequency shift is 0.0042. So depending upon the shift, we are going to clearly tell what type of contaminant is there in the water. This is one of the thing which we have developed in our lab. Of course, we need to fabricate many things. Small chips we have, my students have fabricated in our nanotechnology lab IISc. But of course, it is not sufficient. We need to go for big this one. You can see the wavelength for a pure water. Wavelength is a signature wavelength of pure water. So this is the peak for a calcium fluoride wavelength. This is a cesium fluoride, the peak wavelength. Lithium fluoride, the peak wavelength. Potassium fluoride, the peak wavelength. Once again, I will show strontium fluoride. So this is for a pure water. Peak wavelength is 3.384, and it is a signature of the pure water. We take it as a standard. So from the standard, how much shift is there? Calcium fluoride the signature wavelength is 3.426 and the wavelength shift is 0.042. Cesium fluoride 3.66, the peak wavelength signature, and shift in wavelength is 0.276. Lithium fluoride 3.2421 is the peak wavelength signature and its shift is 0.037 from the peak wavelength of pure water. So how much is the difference? Difference than potassium fluoride 3.668 and the shift is 2.284, and strontium fluoride 3.433 is the signature wavelength of strontium fluoride and the shift is 0.049. So like that we can get different kind of sensors, and this is a whole thing including this one, the transmission spectrum of a pure water, calcium, cesium, lithium, potassium, strontium and frequency shift. So we can do it. So reflection spectrum, and this is a zoomed version of that one. So I think I'll show, these are all the publication out of this results. We got quite number of good publications writing from Springer, then IEEE, then we have Elsevier. So this is another structure, designing and modeling of a photonic crystal nanocavity based presence sensor. So up till now I have shown some few structures, and this structure I think Professor Srinivas has told how to fabricate it. You can see silicon fold 50 micro, this whole thing is silicon based. Of course, I have already told third and fifth group elements play a vital role in future, and we need for a good fab facility to create that one that is not there in India. Third and fifth group element. So silicon, it is a wafer. Silicon is 459 micrometers. Silicon dioxide 3 micrometers. Silicon 220 nanometers. I don't want to completely deal with the fabrication process. It has already been dealt by Professor Hegde and Professor Srinivas sir. You can see photonic crystal line defect here, a small line defect, and applied pressure. After applied pressure, we have got deformation. So when there is a deformation, there will be a change in refractive index. When you pass the light without pressure, you will get one wavelength, and when you pass the pressure with certain applied pressure, we are going to get different wavelengths depending upon the applied pressure. So depending upon the wavelength shift, we are going to tell how much is the power, how much is the pressure by using pressure sensors. Okay, so this is a nano cavity is formed by modifying the radius of one air hole in the center of the lattice structure. So by using this pressure sensor, this can always be used in used as a vibration sensor. This can be used in the application of measuring pulse, BP, wherever there is a variation, we can measure using the pressure sensors. So these are all design parameters of structure. How much is the radius, how much is the filling ratio, how much is the lattice constant, and what all these things. So these are all the things which we have done it. And this is a nano cavity. Light is entering here, light is coming out of this one. And a peak, where the peak. So without pressure, we will get one peak. And depending upon the pressure, we are going to get different peaks. So depending upon that one, we are going to classify how much is the pressure. So these are all the some of the papers which we have published using this photonic based sensor in our silicon on insulator platform. And once again, another structure, design and modeling of PCM, photonic crystal MRR. So it is a ring resonator structure, hexagonal ring we have considered, and different parameters like rod diameter, refractive index, and all those things we have considered here. So this is the structure. This is the view of the rods, how it is placed, what type of, and transmission characteristic. So this is the summary of this this one. And another thing I have already told, we have done. The previous thing was this was on actually resonator. Resonator means we should have high quality factor. So it resonates at particular value of wavelength, and this resonator should have high Q. If you have high Q, the resolution is better and you will get more accuracy. But when come to this MZI, I think all of us know about MZI. For a photonics person, I need not have to elaborate it. Of course, we have to tell Mach-Zehnder interferometer. We have two arms. Two Y branches will form a Mach-Zehnder interferometer. So we will have two arms, upper arm and lower arm. So one arm we take it as a sensing arm, and another arm we are taking it as a reference arm. So depending upon the what you call at the end. So when you give the input, at one point. At the end, you are going to get modulated version, or what you call interfered optical output. So depending upon the interference, we are going to define what type of sensor we can design. So this is what design of PCRR based force sensor involves two phases, namely design analysis of the diaphragm is carried out by finite element method. Design and analysis of photonic crystal Match-Zehnder interferometer is carried out by FTTD method. So FEM and FTTD method. So you can see here the structure looks like that. This is, of course, we have done this one, and this is almost we have sent it to one of the IEEE transactions. I think it is partially accepted. They have given some modification, some queries they have done. So you can see here we can apply pressure here, and this is without applying the pressure. So this is a sensing arm, this is a plane arm. So if you launch the light here, you are going to get the light here. Design parameter of MZI. So when we apply the pressure without applying the pressure, so interference is different. You are going to get one wavelength. If we after applying the pressure here, depending upon the applied pressure, there will be change in the wavelength. That wavelength shift is evident, and from that one we can use this as pressure sensor. That's what actually structure cross section here 20. These things I think you can go through it. Lattice constant is 420 nanometer. Radius of hole is 135 nanometer. Thickness is 220 nanometer. That is 0.55 angstrom. The filling ratio R by A is 0.3. Ensure sufficient amount of PBG and T mode of operation. So this is what actually I have already discussed about the structure. So stress analysis on this one, using the stress analysis we have done it. So we got reasonably good results using numericals. I have purchased a numericals for my lab to deal this one. Displacement analysis has been done. Clearly we got very good, reasonably good results. Transmission characteristic for different pressures, you can see here. For different applied pressures, you can see evidently 0 megapascal is this pressure. If for 0.6 megapascal you got this green, 1.2 megapascal red, or pressure 1.8 megapascal, 1.8 this one. So like that. So we got different values of what you call wavelength shift for different values of pressure. So these are all supposed to be, once again, what you can call it as a signature of that particular wavelength. So and the precision is very good in this one. It is highly precise, and this can be used mainly in medical application, wherein you got for heartbeat, pulse rate, and all those things. We can definitely use this one. So these are all the results we got from this one. And I already told this is in the publication stage, and high quality photonic crystal based ring resonator for detection of glucose concentration in urine and blood. So this is also under preparation. We have already submitted to IEEE, and once again the same thing, high quality factor photonic crystal based resonator biosensor. So for measuring glucose concentration in urine and blood. So whatever we are using is invasive. You have to prick in the finger, and or you have to draw the blood, and ultimately you should check the glucose content in the blood. So this can directly definitely help us in doing non-invasive. So most of the people in India are becoming diabetic at the early ages. Now with this one, non-invasive thing, you need not have to prick. You directly get the precise measurement of glucose content in the urine or blood. You can see the variation. So normal without without no this one 80 to 120 we make it normal. Now 0.0625 grams per deciliter, you can see green. So depending upon the what you call content of the sugar or glucose in that one, you are going to get at the output different value of wavelength. So depending upon the wavelength, we can directly tell how much amount of glucose content is there in the urine. Of course, we have got Benedict solution method. So that is where this is a precise one. Okay. So results and discussion, once again the same thing, transmission spectra discussion. Okay. Urea, and also we have done urea concentration in urine also. How much is the urea? Normal urea is this graph. For 0.625, this one. For 1.25, for 2.5, we got this kind of result. So this is the pressure sensor structure. Once again, pressure sensor structure, and these are the wafers. You can see different structure, how it looks like. So wafers, how it looks like, you can see. So now the last one, actually, among this one is, I would like one of our sensor we have made exclusively for detection of COVID-19, and have submitted a proposal to Government of India and Government of India PMO office, as well as Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Dr. Harsha. So they are actually reviewing it. I think they told sometime later they'll call me, and I have to go and give the specification of this one. And of course, from this one, if we develop this sensor, whatever we are having that PCR, RT-PCR means polymerized chain reaction. It will take 8 to 10 hours. But if you use this photonic crystal sensor, it will, within no time, we can detect whether the person is infected with COVID-19 or not. Another thing is early detection is possible using photonic crystal in case of infection of some other virus or bacteria. So this I'll show you. COVID-19. Coronavirus are roughly spherical. It is supposed to be one of the biggest virus when compared to the other virus. The average diameter of the virus particle is around 125 nanometers, that is 0.125 micrometer. The diameter of the envelope is around 0.85 nanometers, and the spikes are around 20 nanometer long. Spikes are around 20 nanometer long. You know that one, because of these spikes, we see that Rh positive A, they are more vulnerable for this COVID-19 infection, because it will take spikes quickly. But O group of blood group, they cannot. These spikes cannot attach to them because of their structure. So this is what we learned from that one. The envelope of the virus in the electron micrographs appears as a distinct pair of electron dense shells that are relatively adequate for electron beam use for scan the virus particle. In fact, I have given an exclusive half-an-hour interview in most of the state television channels regarding this detection of COVID-19. We can detect, in fact, quickly. The maximum thing is 5 rupees to 20 rupees for one detection. And if the chip is manufactured in bulk, that means 1 billion kit or 2 billion kit, it can be easily done. Fine, I think this is what. So Bacillus series also we have done it. So these are all the results which biosensor and photonic EM equation. So OPTI FTTD also we have used sometime later, sometime before. Total internal reflection, interference. So these are different coupling. So you can see how the light is coupled in the ring resonator structure, double ring, and this is asymmetric double ring. So we have and also split ring, different kind of resonator structures and applications. Actually, applications due to the nature of light, we have got a lot of medical applications. We have got a lot of pressure application sensing, temperature sensing applications, humidity sensing applications. So there are many fold. Actually, whatever I am telling, whatever we are having electronics era in the previous century now, or a decade, now it is the era of photonics. Photonics is completely encroaching in the all the fields. So whenever I tell in the coming years, there will now, I think days are not far off. So instead of electronics and communication, now it will be a photonics and communication. Already it is there. Whatever I am giving the talk, it is through fiber optic cable, and I got 300 Mbps line from GeoFiber. You just imagine. So once again, different structures design. There are a lot of things in our lab. We have done quite a number of. I mean, this is a double ring, hexagonal ring resonator, and this is also another view of it. So how light is launched and results. There are different results. I think I'm done with my time, because I think more than 1 hour I have taken. I think it may wind up quickly. You can see this kind of results of double hexagonal ring resonator. These are the results. I can go through it.
Sir, Shrikant ji.
And once again, graph results.
Shrikant ji.
applications. references.
Shrikant ji, can you
And,
hear me?
at the end of this session, I think almost concluded with this one. So in my lab, we have developed a separate photonics initiative research lab in my department. So we do a lot of work on surface plasma resonance, photonic band gap crystals, high speed optical networks, quantum dots, and recently we have started with quantum communication. So that is actually I have a couple of students who are working in the area of quantum communication. So this is my lab view, my research. I mean, there are many. Those who are there on that day, I took the pick of them. So I think they are doing research in my lab. All of them are my PhD students, and two of them already completed. Dr. Triveni, the examiner for Dr. Triveni is Dr. Devendra Mohan only, and Dr. Indra, the same day, both of them have completed their defense. And in the middle, we have Yashaswini, then Pratap, Hemant are in my lab. So I think I have done with my slides. If anything, any questions is there, I'm going to take. So thank you. Devendra Mohanji.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I am looking if somebody may have asked some question or not. Can we use it for temperature sensor? Nikhil is asking something. Nikhil, are you there? Nikhil?
Yes, sir.
You can ask question
Sir,
yourself.
in Magenta experiment, we make a pressure sensor. I want to ask, can we use it for temperature sensor?
Sure. See, in the Magenta interferometer, you can use fiber product rating. You know that one? In the sensing,
Yes,
if you use FBG, it can be used as a temperature sensor.
And sir, can you show, sir, 81 slide, 81 number slide?
81, huh? Okay. May I know who you are?
He is Nikhil.
Nikhil. From which university?
Guru Dambeswar University, sir.
Oh, okay. Okay, fine.
Sir, pressure sensor, sir.
This is 81, slide number 81.
No, sir.
You told 81. Pressure sensor, huh?
Sir, reading. Sir, pressure sensor reading.
Now, what type of pressure sensor? We have developed resonant pressure sensor, MZI. Which one you would like?
MZI, sir.
MZI, okay. This one? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Readings, sir. Readings. Next one. Next.
This one?
Next. Sir, ये
Okay, fine.
सर रीडिंग बहुत कम नहीं है सर, ये मैंने जो किया था सर बहुत ज्यादा रीडिंग आई थी सर इसमें.
Okay. I'm not able to hear you properly. Will you please tell me what's your question?
What is your exact question? You are asking about the readings and
Yes, sir.
You are talking about this gap in the readings 0.6 to 1.2 or 1.2 to 1.8 or something else.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, Dr. Shrikant, he must be asking that a large number of readings could have been taken because the gap is more in this pressure.
Okay. That I think we can do it. No issue at all. That is that's not a big problem. That's not a big problem.
Nikhil, that can be done. That is
Yeah.
your sensitivity, how sensitive, or what is the least count of your instruments and like that. You understand?
Yes, sir. Magenta
device basically.
Magenta interference is very sensitive, sir. So, sir, the gap is.
No. Actually, we have taken some results.
You want to note down the sensitivity of the instrument, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, we have done the analysis also. It is highly sensitive. Exactly. Right now in my slide, I don't have that number. Definitely, it is highly sensitive, but not as highly sensitive as our resonant cavities. Resonant cavities are much high sensitive than MZIs. Nikhil, is it
सर
right?
इसमें सर जब मैंने किया था सर, तो इसके मतलब कि रीडिंग लेने के लिए मैंने माइकलसन एक्सपेरिमेंट को यूज करना पड़ा था सर.
Yeah. You have used the Michelson interferometer, is it?
Yes sir.
Okay. If you have got some more doubt, you are feel free to even call me or.
Okay, Nikhil, you can personally ask this question because you have done something and you want to understand it. So now, Karan Singh, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
What you want to ask? Ask.
No, sir. I have no questions.
Okay, thank you. So if there are no questions, let us
Hello,
thank.
Hello,
yes,
excuse me.
yes.
I am Dr. Hiranmay Mahapatra from C.V. Raman Global University, Odisha.
Okay.
Okay, I have a fundamental question. I
Yeah.
wanted to know refractive index profile of PCF. While using FTTD method, we need refractive index profile. So as sir told, here refractive index is function of R here.
Hmm.
So how do you write refractive index profile of PCF?
So it's a very good question actually, and of course I am not completely a pure physicist. I am basically an engineering graduate. I definitely will clarify your doubt. The thing which we have done so far, so ready-made data is available on the net. The whole thing, the how refractive index variation. You can Google it and definitely you can get it.
Actually,
Right.
I Google it. I could not get this answer. Actually, while doing the calculation of graded index fiber, we are writing that expression some sort of profile
Oh
functions.
yeah. Okay.
So here, how do you write?
No, actually, whatever you are telling is that n, whatever you are doing it in n, in graded index, refractive index profile. I am right, no? If you change the what do you call R, you are going to have different kind of refractive index profile depending upon the structure, right?
Yes.
Now for this, it's a variation with respect to R. And if you want, I can give the whole thing. What all the what do you call equation governing the variation of refractive? It is available. I can send it through it. You can mail
Okay,
it.
I'll share the link and anybody can interact with.
But whatever she told is a very good question, because that
Yeah.
is where we have to do a lot of work on that one. That is where we get a lot of results.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
madam. Okay.
People are doing actually this set of they are taking different kind of structures, triangular, hexagonal structures,
Yeah.
and they are using.
You please mail me, madam. I think I'll definitely clarify your doubt. That's not a big
Okay,
doubt.
madam,
for
I
me.
can. You can have mail from me, and I'll share the mail, and you can directly interact with.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Shrikant, for the wonderful talk and covering the biosensors. Particularly, you have given the idea for COVID-19 Bacilli series detection using the photonic crystal biosensors. So, I thank you very much for the enlightening us with the so many things, terminology related to fibers and biosensors and all that. Okay, thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Professor. Once again, Devendra Mohanji, and then your team for giving me an opportunity to be a part of this FDP. So
Yeah.
thank you. I leave. Thank you. Bye
This is
bye.
only because of your encouragement that I am doing FDP. Because when we met, you said that you go for FDP.
Yeah. No, that's what
We
actually
got covered.
definitely a long time we met. I think we met in March, no, before March.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before
So
COVID.
I think we met more than 3 to 4 times in various
Yeah.
platforms. Last we met in IIT Guwahati. I think.
Yeah, last in IIT got it, but before that in Jaunpur, you
Yeah.
started asking me for FDP. So
Yeah.
it was my mind, so I got the opportunity, and here we are.
Fortunately, it was done, but unfortunately, we could not come face to face.
Yeah. Anyway,
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
thank you all, thank you everyone. So, to all the participants, we'll be meeting at 3 So you have a sufficient time for tea and lunch. So we'll be sharply joining at 3. Thank you very much. Thank you.